USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Edge for Friday, March 10th, 2023. Each week we handicap and prognosticate some top games of the weekend. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Get your tickets now at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin. And gentlemen, before we jump in, just by way of explanation, there weren't lines on games in the East, probably because ECAC and Atlantic Hockey have not had lines all season. And games on Wednesday in Hockey East were just too late for them to get numbers in for this week. But we do have some great matchups in the NCHC and in the Big Ten. Why wouldn't they have lines this late in the week? Do they like to set them early on in the week, Jim?
That's a good question. I was actually very surprised that lines did not come out this morning, or at least yesterday after the Wednesday games. And maybe they still might. And that's the thing. We have to record this a little bit before our distribution time. But I'm very surprised about the ECAC in particular. And maybe it's because the odds makers look at it and just say, we don't have a lot of edge. That tournament is more unpredictable. You have some heavy. I mean, Quinnipiac's such a heavy favorite that you probably don't want to have to set them up in any sort of a bet. So I guess there's probably some good reasons. Atlantic Hockey, we haven't seen a lot of odds on. I mean, maybe throughout the season, maybe 3 to 4 games throughout the entire season. So I guess that has a lot to do with it. The Hockey East approach of doing Wednesday, Saturday, and don't be surprised if Friday night odds come out after the first games are over. The the NCHC, even across the country in all the leagues. Once those games end, you might see some Saturday morning lines on the Hockey East games.
Well, let's take a look at those 3 matchups in the NCHC, and interestingly enough, 2 of them are repeats of last weekend, although one switches location. And that first one that does is North Dakota. They're -105 at Omaha, which is -125. The over-under is 6. Omaha last weekend was at Ralph Engelstad Arena, had an overtime loss and a regulation loss. So a little bit of an edge there to North Dakota, but some pretty close numbers there. How do you approach this?
Home cooking should be better for Omaha. That's one of those difficult situations. You're on the road, a very tough road environment. But I've been saying it now for maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks, that if there's one team that will be a road team in the NCHC playoffs that will be dangerous, North Dakota feels like that team. And here we are. They're playing Omaha, trying to beat them 4 in a row, 4 out of 5, however it has to go to get 2 out of 3 in this weekend. I think it's still a tough task. I think Omaha at home is a better team. But North Dakota knows they can play. There should be confidence in this team. The over-under of 6 right now, I kind of like the over there. Knowing the fact that if North Dakota is probably going to win, it's probably going to be a higher scoring game. So I do like the Fighting Hawks here.
I find it funny how things kind of change and perceptions change in the matter of a couple of weeks. If you were to go back heading into last weekend, Omaha had won 3 of 4, had won 4 of 6. I know they had that game against Colorado College that was 2-2 or whatever it was. Going back to Western Michigan, they'd won 5 of 7, and now they've lost 3 of the last 4. So the weekend sweep kind of tilts everything on its head. I'd say that from an odds maker standpoint, the home cooking for Omaha should at least even this out a bit. I know going up to North Dakota, especially when North Dakota's playing well, makes it that much more difficult. I don't like North Dakota at -105 for this. I like North Dakota to maybe win, but I just don't like the odds. I like Omaha at home. I like Omaha being better than what they've been the last couple of weeks. But you're right. It's going to be one of those. If Omaha wins, it's hitting the under. If North Dakota wins, it's hitting the over. And I think we said that last week, and I'm going to reiterate that that's most likely the case. I know the overtime loss aside, but that's probably going to be the case. And I would argue to take the under here if you believe Omaha's going to win it. which, to be fair, I think Omaha is going to win the first game. I don't know about the rest of the weekend, but if we're talking strictly the first game, it's really hard to beat a team 3 consecutive games.
Looking at North Dakota, a couple of things really lean in their favor, I think. One is they have been terrific on the power play all season, but it seems like they've also turned around their goaltending issues. Drew DeRitter on the season has an .898 save percentage, but in his last 4 games, that's .941 with a 1.46 goals against. So if he continues to play that well and they continue to do well on the power play, you might have a little bit of an advantage there for the Fighting Hawks.
Goaltending matters. There's no doubt about that, especially this time of year. I'm not sure how much power play matters, though, because I guess I watch a lot of Hockey East, and I do feel, and this is not a criticism, I do feel like there's a little bit more leeway in the postseason for Hockey East. They let them play a little bit more, so you don't have the same number of power plays, at least the games that I've seen down the stretch and then Wednesday in terms of the number of penalties called. So I don't expect a ton of power plays. Maybe the NCHC refs will call this a little differently. I don't think that's going to be the case, though. So I don't know that the power play goes into it as much, but I just see more value in North Dakota at one. I know at -105 doesn't feel like a big dog. But I'm going to get into it in more games later where they're bigger spreads, but there can be a first night advantage to taking the underdog, and we'll get into that a little more in the next few games.
The next game in the NCHC is a repeat of the matchup and a repeat of the venue. Minnesota Duluth is +170 at St. Cloud State, which is a -210. Over-under is 6. But during the season, St. Cloud didn't get any points against UMD until the last game with an overtime win, meaning Minnesota Duluth had a win at St. Cloud and 2 home wins for 10 out of 12 points on the season.
This is very interesting to me. And the fact that Duluth is such an underdog, a +170. And I'll get into my speech here. I wrote about it last week in the Friday morning column in Edge. But I really feel that when you get into a situation where you have an underdog, the first game, especially a 170 underdog, +170, that's a good deep hole to try to bet into and get some money out of. I love doing that in game 1 because if Minnesota Duluth wins game 1, game 2 odds, it's probably going to be Minnesota Duluth +120, maybe +130. It might even get into a situation like North Dakota where it's actually minus money, slightly minus money. So I like getting that in game 1. You're taking a risk for certain. St. Cloud probably wants to reset their whole season here, and they want to do it in one day because they're back to 0-0. But you also have to take some of the history into consideration here. 3 wins, an overtime loss. I mean, Minnesota Duluth has done really well against St. Cloud State, and St. Cloud State really goes into this postseason limping a little bit. So I like Duluth here. Over under of 6, I'd stay away from.
You say St. Cloud's limping. I'll just come out and say it. They've played like crap the last month in the outcomes. I shouldn't say they've played like crap, but the outcomes have been crap for them. And that's not to say they're a bad team, but they have really fought it. I mean, they've had a lot of losses for a team that we would have expected to be a number 1 overall seed at one point during this year. I mean, they went out and they swept Denver. And then it was like season over at that point. They lost twice to Duluth. They didn't beat Miami. They lost to North Dakota. They split with Omaha, and they split with Duluth. So they're getting some wins. But to me, that's too much of a red flag. And I can't ignore it. I realize I'm using a lot of harsh words for a team that's probably going to go out and win the series, but I just can't get behind them in the first game the way things have gone. They need to show that they need to prove it at this point. And I know that's again, some harsh language, especially given what I think about Minnesota Duluth, which is that I don't think they've played their best stuff yet. And I think they're going to be a good hockey team. And I think based on what we said earlier in the year when we picked Duluth successfully, there's something in the water that I think Scotty Sandelin's going to have in this postseason. I think they're going to beat this team before they're eliminated.
So bottom line, Duluth, a good value in this one.
Oh yeah.
Really good. Especially game 1.
Yeah.
Take the underdog game 1. They pull off the upset. Maybe then you wait for game 3 and see if it goes to 3, then you don't touch game 2. But yeah, I like the thought of Duluth coming out of this. And if they swept, I would not be surprised.
The last one we have on the list here from the NCHC is Colorado College. CC is a plus 290 at Western Michigan, which is a minus 350. The over-under on this one is 5.5. And you go back to the regular season, Western Michigan just dominated during the season, won all 4 games and did so in some of those games very conclusively. Is this one even a contest? Do you even consider the underdog in this one?
Well, I'll tell you, when I look at Chris Mayott's team and what they've done this year and their accomplishments, Colorado College, I have a lot of respect for where they are and who they are right now. I can't touch this one. This is Western the whole way, and minus 350. There's no value there to bet this game. They should not have a problem with this series. And again, no disrespect to Colorado College, because I think that they have taken great steps forward. They are just running into Western at the wrong time, a team they didn't match up well against all regular season. I just don't see this as being, this might be the least competitive of the series. I did not put Denver, Miami on here. I honestly think that might be a tougher matchup, Denver taking on Miami. Then I just don't know why Colorado College doesn't match up well with Western. And now when you're looking at the Broncos coming into the postseason as hot as they are, they're playing really good hockey of late. I just don't see it. Over under 5.5. I feel like this is probably one that could get to a 5-2, maybe even 6-2, 6-3. 6-3 doesn't feel good. I don't think that Western's going to give up a lot of goals, but I think that they could score some. So if Colorado College can find a way to keep this game down to a 3-2 game, they get a chance, because then you have a pull goalie situation, try to get to overtime, and then you get the lucky puck. But that is the only way I see CC emerging in this one.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you guys know, and everyone who listens to this knows my affinity for Western right now. I think Western could win the conference. It wouldn't surprise me if they'd be the team that would do it. They'd be the team that would go out and win it easily. I don't like the over under at 5.5. I don't like Colorado College at plus 290. This isn't even one of those that, Rubin's going to go out and look at the odds and just tell you to throw $10 down on it because the odds are so long. I don't think Colorado College is winning. So it's, I can't even say that there's an open possibility on this. So I'm not going to do it. So I'm going to say, leave this one alone and bet the over. This is not Wisconsin earlier in the year in a regular season. It's not Wisconsin in the regular season. This is Colorado College in the postseason, and that's a bigger difference.
Yeah. And, we've talked on a number of our podcasts about the job that Pat Ferschweiler has done as head coach. Last year, a lot of great players coming in, fresh start, but he had to reload quite a bit this year, and he's still seeing similar, if not even better success.
He feels a great coach of the year candidate to me. I don't know what the NCHC will turn up for their winner of that award. He would then have to probably get to a Frozen Four to be in the National Coach of the Year running with. But what he's done, I think I mentioned on Monday, I really am impressed by how difficult a job it is at Western Michigan. This is not a Power 5 school. This is not a perennial powerhouse school. This is not a team that has, banners hanging in Lawson that say national champions all over them. This is a team that is building off of great recruiting, working the transfer portal well, and great coaching. And I think that Pat Ferschweiler has brought that in spades this season.
Can you imagine being that coaching staff and bringing in a recruit on a home game night at Lawson?
I'd like it. I mean, there's certain buildings, Orodo, Maine's another one. You can bring, schools that don't have traditions, right? Maine has a little bit more. They've won national championships. Go to Merrimack when they're packing it in. Go to Northeastern for a BU game and let a recruit see those things. I mean, these are old barns that they just resonate well when you can't believe your ears because it's just so darn loud. Lawson goes into that category as well.
Well, let's take a break. We've got 2 Big Ten games to look at. USCHO Edge is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida.
All right, class, it's the NCAA Men's Frozen Four. Welcome to Fandom 101. Want to help your team rule the rink? Here's your assignment. Lesson 1, go big for every goal. 2, when you bring it, bring enough for the whole class. And 3, attendance is encouraged, but passion is mandatory. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Buy your tickets today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
We're back with more of USCHO Edge. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin. Well, we were talking a little bit about underdogs in our first segment. These are underdogs in a single game, and this is a big underdog here. Michigan State, which got past Notre Dame and won its first 2 games in Big Ten playoff history. The Spartans are plus 250 at Minnesota, which is minus 320. The over-under on this Saturday night game is 6.
Okay, sports bettors, I get it. It's hard to handicap games. College hockey does not get the attention, but man, putting Michigan State plus 250 on the road against a team that just had a 1-week bye at the time of year you don't want to have a bye in Minnesota, and making Minnesota minus 320. I don't know. This is my pizza money game. I would not have pizza for a couple of weeks. I would take the money, the $50 I would spend on them. I would throw that on Michigan State for the heck of it. I know it's a long shot. I get it. You're on the road. You're at Minnesota. You're against the team that is really the best team in the country. But why? Why can't Minnesota have a night off when they're coming into a situation where they're not playoff tested this year? They haven't gone through it. It's very hard. I was talking with Providence coach Nate Lehman today, because they'll play a second playoff game on Saturday against Northeastern. He said sometimes it's just good to have that first game, or in this case for Michigan State, first 3 games already in the playoffs, because you get some of those jitters out. You don't see guys making tentative plays. You're just more confident as you get into the game. I know that Minnesota is a better team than Michigan State. Michigan State is a good enough team that they can beat Minnesota in a 1-game scenario. So if I'm going to throw money on this, the Spartans are my pick. There's no doubt.
Yep. And that's why I picked Michigan State, was exactly for that reason. If this were a best of 3 series, I'd be inclined still to pick Michigan State in the first game. I don't think they can beat Minnesota in a 3-game series. And I would actually argue that that a 3-game, series would probably be better for the Gophers at this point. But, it's single elimination, and in 1 game, and I've seen this so many different times, weird stuff happens in a single game elimination. Like you get a bad puck bounce, you get a bad penalty, you get a third period call that you offsides that you didn't want. Weird stuff can happen in a 1-game single elimination. And if you watched any of those games last week against Notre Dame, even the 1-0 game, 1 loss, you'd see a Michigan State team that felt different from the sweep against Michigan, different from the blowout against Minnesota, the 8-0 loss, different from the 6-0 loss to Ohio State. Michigan State played with an edge that I don't think I quite remember seeing out of them. And for that reason, they flipping a switch, getting through an emotional series against Notre Dame, coming into Minnesota against a team with a bye. This reeks of one of those things that we've seen in college hockey, which is team that's not supposed to win goes into someone else's building and knocks them off. I will say this, over-under of 6, I hate it. It's the perfect over-under, because I could see this being a 3-2 game and it hits the under. Michigan State up 3-1 or up 2-0 and winds up having to hold off the Gophers with an empty net at the end. Maybe you get that empty net and it's a push. It's not hitting the over either. So I just don't like a lot of what this offers, but I would absolutely take the Spartans outright.
How do you weigh in the results from this season? At Munn, at the home ice for Michigan State, Minnesota won 5-0 and 6-3. And at Mariucci in January, 8-0 and 6-3. Over the course of the regular season, Minnesota outscored the Spartans 25-6.
You don't. You can't. This is the thing that I'm trying to get across is that you just can't. You can't do it in a postseason. Like, you just can't. It's so hard to beat a team 5 times in a season, and you and I have seen it hundreds of times in Atlantic hockey. It's so hard to beat a team 5 times in a season. It's also really hard to go undefeated against a team when you see them, when you know each other, when you don't have as many games. So I'm getting really excited about Michigan State right now, because this is the team that, if you're hanging out down there at 14 in the pairwise, you don't want Michigan State to do what Michigan State might be able to do. And for that reason, understanding all of those factors, the first 4 games, I tend to throw all that out because, you lost 8-0 on the road. You lost 6-3 on the road. Minnesota's not going to throw anything at Michigan State that they haven't seen already.
The one thing I will say, and we have not discussed this all year, this might be one of the best in-game betting games of the year.
Oh, yeah.
The first period determines a ton of this game. If Minnesota jumps out to a 2-0 lead, the game's over. There's no coming back from that. You're not going to chase this game if you're Michigan State and find a way to come back and win. That's not going to happen. But if this is a 0-0 game or a 1-1 game or even a 1-0 Michigan State game, you're going to see some good value lines out there. Minnesota will still be a pretty heavy favorite. So maybe you won't get Michigan State at plus 250, but you'll have 20 minutes in the book, know that they're in the game, they're playing well, and you might get them at plus 170 or plus 180. Grab that. That's the time that you can also grab it. Maybe you've already put the plus 250. You see them in an advantageous situation and their odds go down a little bit. Grab it. I would not touch Michigan State if they're trailing after 1. And I say that sincerely. I don't think that they're going to chase the game well. But if you can see them in a 1-1 situation or a 2-2 game or a 0-0 game, a 1-0 lead, definitely a 2-0 lead, take whatever odds you can get, because they're probably going to be in a good position to still pull off the game, and the value will remain.
Flip side of that is, if Michigan State takes a first period lead on Minnesota, as the period ticks down, watch the odds on Minnesota. And if it gets to 1-0, even if it gets to 2-0, Minnesota could come back from that. And that's the point that I'm trying to make, where it could be a 3-2 game. Is when you see the odds start to go, the minus 320 starts to drop closer to 0. And if you really think Minnesota is going to win and you want to bet Minnesota and you don't want to bet them minus 320, then look for a minus 250 or look for a minus 200 if it drops enough, depending on how that first period goes with Michigan State. In inverse, it works similar, which is
we're looking at this from both sides of the same equation right now.
Exactly. Still wouldn't touch the over-under.
You can still do some hedging here. If depending on how much you want to bet on Michigan State, they take a lead, you can always hedge back against them if you have to.
Interestingly enough, in the whole landscape outside of betting, a loss by Minnesota and a win by Quinnipiac, and then Quinnipiac, if they prevail for the league championship in ECAC, could overtake Minnesota depending on things, and you could see number 1 Quinnipiac instead of a number 1 Minnesota. So there's a lot hanging on this game.
Yeah, I think I've looked at the pairwise a couple of times. It's a little tough, I think, for Quinnipiac to make that pass right now. But this would be the weekend. They would need Michigan State to pull off the upset to give an opportunity for Quinnipiac even to get to that number 1 slot.
And of course, Quinnipiac draws a team in Yale that would throw everything out the window anyway if Yale managed to win. I mean, that's just the layers of this too. If you're looking at futures and stuff like that, and at this point are wild. Don't hang out. I mean, with the favorites and this is going to be a wild weekend anyway.
Well, and the wildest one may be the one we left for last. Ohio State is plus 135 at minus 165 Michigan. The over-under is 6. OSU took 2 of 4 games this season, plus 2 points in a shootout tie. So 8 out of 12 points taken from the Wolverines this season. And Ohio State has been playing better than expected this season.
They are. And I love Steve Rollock's team. I'm still on Michigan at home. I don't know why. I don't have a good reasoning for this one. This is one where I just have to go with the gut. I feel like somehow Michigan will get up for this game at home. Single elimination at home. Got through the series they had to get through last week against Wisconsin. Wasn't that easy. Had a couple of tough games, but they've got their playoff legs under them. I feel like they can be ready for Ohio State, but this, of the 5 games that we have talked about underdogs, and obviously North Dakota, the slightest of underdogs, Ohio State, the next smallest value for an underdog. Ohio State has a real chance here. Single game makes it a lot easier. So I don't mind Ohio State here, but if somebody was telling me I had to make a bet, I would go at Ohio State. And here we go again with 6 on the over-under. It just felt like the books loved 6 this weekend. I don't love that number again. I feel like we're going to get 7, 8, 9. But if Ohio State wins, 3-1 could be the number.
Well, what I think about the books at this point is that they are hedging on the fact that, or they're banking on the fact that hockey playoffs are typically lower scoring than hockey regular season. They're kind of banking on, all right, this should be 6.5, but we're going to take half a goal off because it's the postseason, and that sort of matters. I obviously don't know that for a fact. That seems like way too elementary of a response, but things get called differently. Things get played differently in the postseason. That's why teams that are very good regular season games aren't very good postseason games, and you have teams that are just built for the postseason. Teams that are built for the postseason, I believe, include Ohio State. I think they're just a team that could go out and win this game. But I also think, there's one other factor in this, which is Ohio State at Michigan. The minute you say that, there is a significant contingent of people who are going to show up to Yost at that game and probably just be ready for blood. They want, that's going to lift that team. That's probably worth half a goal to me. Because it's Ohio State. And I understand hockey is a little bit different, but that's like putting Cornell on the Harvard schedule. That's like putting Air Force on the Army schedule. That's like putting, Minnesota on the North Dakota schedule. Like, there are just going to be people that just show up who are ready to get wild for that game because it's Ohio State, Michigan. So I think that's worth half a goal at -165. I also think Michigan has to be a team in this that needs to prove what everyone says about Michigan. Like last year when Michigan made it to the Final Four and they had all those draft picks and they had all those guys, we all sat back and we were like, they need to win something. Like, they need to win something to prove it. And I think given, the guys like Fantilli, the guys who are on that roster who are still carrying the water of Michigan hockey, they need to win this game to kind of justify the hype that goes around Michigan hockey.
I agree with that. I think that there is a lot that has to do with where is Michigan. They've had everything. Everything feels like it's broken their way in terms of the draft picks they pulled in, having the best players, having this great roster, on the cover of Hockey News, all of these wonderful things. And listen, I would not take any of that away from what Michigan has accomplished in terms of their recruiting over the years. Now they need to win hardware. They need to put trophies in their case. Starts this weekend. They've got to find a way to get through Ohio State.
And let's be clear, Michigan is not the best team in the Big Ten right now. That's Minnesota. That's why Minnesota won the conference championship. Minnesota beat Michigan, swept them earlier in the year. Minnesota, I believe, took 1 of 2 at Yost, at home, in January. Minnesota is better than Michigan. That statement cannot sit well with Michigan. Michigan has to go out and say, we're better than Minnesota, but we're going to show that we're better than Minnesota this week by beating Ohio State, and we're the best team in the Big Ten.
Oh, I like that. I like that comparison. That is the way to really sum it up.
I want to ask you 1 or 2 very quick questions here. Also on the DraftKings odds for these games, at least for all the games, there are prop bets on the final score, and most of those would pay handsomely. Do you even mess with those? What do you do with those?
I need to stay away from them, really. I know somebody who, I think it was last Friday night, good friend, texted me. He had thrown $20 down on 3-1 for the Lowell Northeastern score, and Lowell won 3-1. It was a Lowell 3-1. You had to have the exact team, everything. He had $20 on Lowell as well. So I think his night ended up being like 550 or something like that. He won. That's a pretty good payout. Those are so rare. Like, you're not going to call the final score, and as soon as you think you're going to call the final score, there's going to be an empty net goal, and it screws up your night. And you're going to, as Dan, I think, is, I don't know if you said throw your remote through your TV, punching the wall.
You rip the phone off the wall, because that's something that happens in 2023. People still have phones, right?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you've done all of these in your lifetime. They're not good bets. I mean, if you just want to waste money, then yes, throw down on these 20 to 1s, 18 to 1s, 25 to 1s, 30 to 1s. Your odds are so bad. You're not even, you could make 30 of these bets on 30 to 1, and you're not going to break even.
Let's put it this way. You're at a craps table. Craps, right? You bet the numbers, you throw down on 6 and 9, or you throw down on 4 and 10, or whatever it is. You throw on a hard 8. You might go with one of those. You do not throw down on one of those random, side bets. I'd say, you can bet the field every now and then, there are all of those bets that you just don't want to touch.
For snake eyes, or
no, you don't bet them. It doesn't matter what the odds look like. You just don't do it. So, I mean, you're not betting on the what's the other one in there that I'm thinking of? Not the field. I think it's the one that's 15 to 1 on 11. Like, don't bet that. So don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. Just don't do that.
You summed it up well. I mean, we're I'm in Massachusetts, as is Dan, and sports gambling became legal a couple of weeks ago. Today, Friday, the 10th of March, it's legal to use your app. And last couple of days on Twitter, I saw some sort of a website that, of course, they're publishing these great success stories of people that hit 5-team parlays and make $200,000 on their $20 bet. You know how many people ever hit their 5-team parlays? Very few, and that's why they pay so much money.
And that's why the casinos can stay in business.
That's why you don't see a lot of casinos that have really bad carpeting and ugly wallpaper. Everything looks really nice, and it's because somebody's paying for it, and it's usually the gambler that's losing. I don't want to make that seem for an excuse not to gamble. If you like your wagering, go ahead, have fun with it. Always bet with your head, not over it. That's an old expression of mine, and here we are in one of our last podcasts of the season saying that. But there are sucker bets out there, and when they look too good to be true, guess what? They're too good to be true.
I got to throw one last one at you, because DraftKings does have this line. It's the futures on the NCHC postseason tournament, who the winner of the tournament will be. Denver's a plus 135, WMU plus 300, St. Cloud State plus 330, then Omaha at 1,100. It goes up from there all the way to 10,000 for Colorado College and 15,000 for Miami. If you're somebody who's really feeling hot on Western Michigan, do you take the Broncos at a plus 300? Is that something to make a good bet on?
Yes. I love that bet. I love it. Because I think Western Michigan's going to win the NCHC. So I love it.
Yeah, I don't mind that one either. I mean, it depends on what you want to win, right? A $10 bet would pay off 40. A $100 bet would pay off 400. Obviously, and just keep going up exponentially from there. I love those future bets. I have not put a college hockey bet in still to date. If there was one I was going to put down, I gave the advice to people who could have driven over the state line from Massachusetts into New Hampshire. Way back in September, in October, I was telling people to bet Penn State when they were 75 to 1. I have not been able to see any futures odds on the NCAA tournament of late. I think that was pulled from DraftKings in the last month, but last I had seen they were down to 12 to 1. So they're best to get those bets early. I know the NCHC probably didn't even have odds until this week or maybe last week. But when you see some good numbers like that, and if you like Western, I like Western right now the way they're playing. 3 to 1's not a bad. If you can take any money and triple it on a given night, it's not the worst.
So here's my thing, though. We're telling people to drive over the border to New Hampshire if you're driving. What happens if you live out by Worcester, though, in Springfield? I mean, you got to go south to Connecticut, right?
Well, Connecticut was more difficult because if you drove from Worcester to Connecticut, you had to keep going and go all the way to Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun. You have to make your sports
in person.
In person.
Okay, yeah. No. Let's go back to live free or die then.
So we, as of today in Massachusetts, you're okay to make your online wagers. You don't have the same amount of games to bet on as you do in Massachusetts. DraftKings is limiting what you can do on some local teams. But listen, I say it again, bet responsibly, bet with your head, not over it.
And with that, we'll wrap up this week's edition of USCHO Edge. We are sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Get your tickets now at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Find our podcasts at uscho.com/podcasts or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. For Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Edge.